Hello everyone, my name is Shirley Huang and I am a bilingual Cantonese English speech-language pathologist. I want to welcome you to this three-part webinar series about bilingual language development. This webinar series is meant for parents, special educators, clinicians, and healthcare professionals. The webinar series will explain bilingual language development, help guide parents and professionals on what they should do if they suspect a child has a language disorder, and it will demystify common myths about bilingual language development. This is a three-part webinar series, and today I will present part 1 titled, How Does Your Child Learn to Speak Two Languages? Today's webinar will define different types of bilingualism, describe how bilinguals learn language, discuss how the environment and the family influences language learning, and explain the bilingual learner's brain. Bilingualism is also known as dual language learning and means the child knows two languages. Bilinguals can be categorized into early bilingualism and late bilingualism. In early bilingualism, we can further categorize them into two types, successive and simultaneous bilingualism. Successive bilingualism means a child learns their first language, L1, and then later learns their second language, L2, early in their childhood. For example, a child who grows up in China learns Mandarin and then later moves to America and learns English. Simultaneous bilingualism means a child is learning two languages at the same time beginning at birth. For example, a boy raised in a Spanish-speaking home, but everyone in his school and surrounding environment speak English. The boy is exposed to two languages and the sounds of those two languages right from birth. In late bilingualism, the individual is learning a new language after the first language is learned and later in life around the adolescent years or adulthood. Learners may even use the knowledge of their first language to learn the second language. This may be the case for many high school students or college students who are required to take a language class. They may use the knowledge of English to help them learn the new language. These are the different types of bilingualism. Our webinar will be focusing on early bilingualism since we are discussing early language learning. Learning two languages, whether it is successive or simultaneous, is quite a natural process for children. Bilingual learners with equal and sufficient exposure to both languages will learn both of their languages at a similar pace as children who learn only a single language from birth. The research shows that bilingual learners will use first words and word combinations at the same ages and for similar communicative purposes as monolingual children. Any differences between their two languages can be attributed to differences in the child's social and language environments. Our environment has a strong influence on children's learning and development. For example, the child may know the word rice because she and her family ate rice every night and she frequently heard the word, but the child may not know the word pizza because she was never exposed to that type of food or that word. Many assume that children who are bilingual are more likely to have language delays. This assumption may have arisen from the fact that it is common for children to know fewer words in each language compared to monolingual children when you examine each language individually. But expecting a bilingual child to show the same vocabulary knowledge as a monolingual child in each language is not realistic because bilingual children generally show distributed vocabulary knowledge. The child may know the word only in one language, and other words they may know in another language. However, the combined amount of words produced, taken from both of their languages, equal that of the monolingual child's. This is called conceptual vocabulary. Conceptual vocabulary takes into consideration the total number of concepts for which a child has a word in at least one language. It is their combined vocabulary knowledge. For example, if the child knows the English words nose, book, and the French words pomme, livre, these words reflect knowledge of three concepts, nose, book, and apple, even though one word is known only in French and one is known only in English. The bilingual child's language learning and development is highly influenced by the child's environment. The figure in this slide depicts the child's environment, which may include the family system, immediate community, and societal changes over time. The inner circle is the family system. The family system may include the nuclear family, such as parents, primary caregivers, siblings, or anyone else who may take care of the child in the home. In the home setting, the child is directly and highly exposed to his or her native language. The child's parents may not speak any English, and so the child is primarily listening and speaking in the native language. The middle circle is the immediate community. The immediate community includes the school environment, extended family members, friends, or community members. One example could be if a child visits his Italian grandparents every summer in Italy. His grandparents and everyone in Italy only speak Italian, and so the child spends the entire summer speaking in Italian. Another example, a former client of mine would go to a Chinese church every Sunday. She would sing Chinese songs, read a Bible written in Chinese, and listen to Chinese sermons. These short or long exposures to language in different environments are critical language experiences and play an important role in the child's language development. Finally, the outer circle describes societal changes over time. This may include society's beliefs and values and how they evolve over time. With the technology we have today, it's so easy to connect to other countries. We have exposure to news, social media. That influences our social use of language and development. For example, we may learn new slang, figurative language, or social phrases from magazines, newspapers, or TV shows. Additionally, our vocabulary reflects events in our environment. Take, for example, during natural disasters or major world events. The child may learn new vocabulary words like war, tornado, earthquake. The news on TV will show these segments over and over again and repeat those same vocabulary words about that topic. Or family members may be talking about it in their native language. The child may see it in their native language in newspapers or magazines. These changes and events in our society impact the child's language development. Our next two slides will talk about the bilingual learner's brain. Bilingual children are not the sum of two monolingual children. Rather, research has shown that bilingual children have a common brain-based system when learning two languages. This common brain-based system is the child's language foundation. The child's language foundation includes the two languages they grew up with. People assume that learning two languages is confusing and our brain is not capable of sorting out which language is which. However, that is not the case. Many studies have shown that bilingual children are in fact capable of complex tasks such as coordinating and exchanging information using two languages without getting confused. The previous slide discussed a common brain-based system when learning two languages. However, when using two languages, we have two language systems that are functionally separate. The child's language experiences and exposures at home, school, and in the community are slowly developing their language. Bilingual children know that these two languages are used differently. Children know when to speak a certain language and to whom. Our two language systems are functionally separate, but they also work together at different language learning stages throughout development. For example, there is research that shows that knowledge of one language may help us to learn sentence structure or grammar in another language. As discussed in the previous slide, the child's learning foundation includes two languages, and they use the same foundation to continue learning throughout their language development. The two languages work together to help the child to continue to learn. So that was part one of our webinar series. Here are some takeaway messages. Bilingual and monolingual learners will reach language stages at a similar pace. The combined amount of words produced taken from both of the child's languages equals that of the monolingual child's. Family, community, and changes in society influence bilingual language development. Bilingual learners have a common brain-based system for learning two languages, but they also have functionally separate systems when using language. Our next webinar will answer the question, how do I know if my bilingual child has a speech and language disorder? Until next time, I'd like you to think about what may be normal in a bilingual language development and what's not. What are some questions that you have about bilingualism or questions that you may have heard other parents ask? Thank you very much for your time and attention. I look forward to our next webinar together.
Good morning. Greetings from San Diego, California. My name is Lily Chang. I'm a speech language pathologist, and I've been asked to talk to the parents over in Boston area about the topic of how do I know if my bilingual child has a speech and language disorder. So that would be the topic. We're going to break this session into 4 parts. The first part is, who is a bilingual child? The second part is, what is a speech disorder? And the third part is, what is a language disorder? And finally, other concerns. Okay, so we're going to break it into 4 parts, as I said, and I want to then talk about bilingualism. In the world, there are more bilingual and multilingual people than monolingual people. That's a statement that I want to make right now. Many people in this world speak 1 language. Many people in this world speak 2 languages, and many people in this world speak more than 2 languages. Now, some of the people encounter difficulties in speaking a language or 2 languages or 3 languages and more. Others do not experience such difficulties. So the question that we want to ask is, what is a bilingual child? In general, a bilingual child is someone who can use 2 languages. And perhaps an even better definition is a child is able to understand 2 languages. A child may not be able to speak 2 languages equally well. And so when we have an issue in a school setting, it is because this person, this child, understands minimally the school language, but may understand his or her home language quite well. Now imagine a bilingual situation. That is 2 people speaking 2 languages to each other. That would be a bilingual situation. In that kind of a situation, people code switch. They can use 1 language and switch to the next, or they can use 1 language and insert some language phrases from another language into this language. So that's called code switching or code mixing. So most bilingual individuals do that naturally. So if a child is exposed to 2 languages at home, this is what he or she is experiencing. That is 2 languages plus language mixing and language switching and code switching. Now, in the home environment, in the United States, there are hundreds of languages being spoken at home. The degree of fluency at home of the home language is different. The degrees are different. We have people at home who use a lot of code switching, but we also have parents and grandparents at home who may speak the home language only. Now, in the cases of refugees, migrants, immigrants, and asylum seekers, we have many, and stateless people here in the United States. We have many linguistic conditions at home. So to understand a bilingual child, we must first understand what is going on at home. A child spends more time at home and in the community than at school. So it is very important we get a home language or languages environment survey and understanding before we define who is a bilingual child. So now we get that straightened out. We can then say the quality of the home language and home languages the quality is very, very important. I can say that in many situations, the quality of the home language is just maintenance home language. What is a maintenance home language? It is for the parents or grandparents or caretakers to use the home language to maintain a peaceful environment at home. That would be a home maintenance situation. I hope this is good enough for you to begin to think about the question of the bilingual child. So my second topic is speech disorder. What is a speech disorder? Let me make it clear that although we say speech and language disorders, we really need to know what a speech disorder is. Okay, it is a term that is used widely among speech language pathologists, and we have a clear definition of what a speech disorder is. I want to give you first an example of a word that has a sound disorder, okay? And I'm going to use Chinese, Mandarin, to give you an example. If we're looking for the target word, which is 裤子, which means a pair of pants, and the child says 兔子, which is a rabbit, that would be a speech disorder. That is, the child is using t, tu for k, ku, and it's also called a substitution. That means the sound of g is replaced by the sound t, t for k, and we also call it fronting. That means the front part of the tongue is being used, or the front of the mouth is being used. So if we're looking for 裤子 and the child says 兔子, that's a substitution, and that's a speech disorder, purely a speech disorder. So as an adult, when the child is looking for that pair of pants and she or he calls it 兔子, we know he or she is not looking for rabbit, but for a pair of pants. Okay, another example would be a tonal example for Chinese again. If we're looking for blanket, it's called 被子. And if we're looking for a cup, it's 杯子. So 杯子 and 被子, we have a tonal disorder. 杯 is the first tone, and 杯 is the fourth tone. So if a child is looking for 杯子 and he calls it 杯子, you know we have a tonal discrimination issue, which also results in a speech disorder. Now, for English, I want to give an example. Again, I will use the word rabbit. Rabbit starts with the sound rabbit. And if a child says webbit, that is using the W for the R. So webbit instead of rabbit, again, is a speech disorder. It is very, very common. Another speech type of disorder would be a sh and a ch, a difference. If you want to say a piece of chalk, it comes out a piece of shock, then you know it's sh, a ch, a disorder. It's also called a speech disorder. Now, if a child has many such speech sound disorders, he or she may become unintelligible in speech. So for speech disorders, we usually say if the child is unintelligible or 10% intelligible, 90% unintelligible, then it is very, very difficult for us to understand what he or she is saying. Now this is important. As a child develops his or her sound patterns, or we call it the sound speech repertoire, we will encounter many situations where this child will have difficulties with what we call the more difficult sounds. So in the beginning, usually a child will be able to say pa, ba, ma. Those are the frontal plosive sounds and nasal sounds. And then we might go to t, d, n. They can say those. And eventually they'll be able to say k and g and ng. And then in this process, they may be able to say s, and then eventually sh, s, and so on. So in a bilingual situation, let's say we're dealing with Chinese and English, there will be some sounds that are not part of the Chinese repertoire, but they are part of the English repertoire. A good example is the sound v, so it's very good instead of very good or very good, or th, like 1, 2, 3 rather than 1, 2, 3. I hope I have given you a glimpse into the world of speech disorders. So this third topic here is language disorder. As I said earlier, many people lump speech disorder and language disorder together. Indeed, it is possible, because if a speech pattern is unintelligible, then how can you even understand language? So language is what people use to communicate. It can be oral, it can be written, and it can be spatial, meaning a sign language. So all these are ways of dealing with human communication, using symbols to write, to express meaning, or using sounds to talk, to express emotions and meaning, or use signs to show I love you and its meaning. So languages are used to transport meaning, to communicate from one person to the next. So if I speak Mandarin and you speak English, then it is very difficult to communicate. So if a person has a language disorder, the person will have difficulty communicating. That is a general statement. So what happens if a person truly has a language disorder? Then I would explain to you there are many different areas of concerns. The first part is the person may have difficulty reading this language, whether it's Farsi, Mandarin, Chinese, or English. If reading is a problem, then we call it a reading disorder. And this person then cannot read easily. And the messages on the written pages are not being understood. Or a person may have a writing disorder, that is, the person can read, but he or she cannot write very well. We consider this a writing disorder. And then in this case, we have dyslexia, problem writing, dysgraphia, problem reading and writing. And then we have people who are born with the inability or difficulty in grasping language in general. That is a language disorder. It is childhood aphasia, the loss of language, even at the beginning of life. Now, in terms of general language disorder, we have reading, we have writing, and then of course we have comprehension. That is, we have an auditory discrimination problem or anything dealing with the hearing side, such as hearing loss. You will not be able to hear the language. If you cannot hear the language clearly, you're not going to be able to speak it. Now, the speaking part is speech plus speech with words and combination of words into an expressive language. So we can have a receptive language disorder, an expressive language disorder, we can have a reading disorder, we can have writing disorder, or we can have an overall language disorder that would be called specific language impairment. And on top of this, we may have some issues with cognition that would be called a language learning disorder. So all of these are very complex. It is not something that can be explained very easily. However, if a person experiences a language disorder, then he or she will have difficulty in learning and in schools. So this is very important. I would like to stress that early detection of speech disorder or language disorder is very necessary. How can early detection be accomplished? it is at home. So parents must be quite vigilant in learning about these types of disorders in order to understand the special needs of their children and to also understand better what it is that we're dealing with in terms of a language disorder. So it's a spectrum from very difficult to understand speech to difficulty in understanding and expressing language. So now, in the case of a bilingual child, if this bilingual child has a language disorder, then he or she will have a language disorder in his or her native or home language. So it is very clear to me that it is not possible for a person who has a language disorder and that disorder is only exhibited in the home language or only exhibited in the school language. A language disorder is a disorder in the acquisition of symbols and in the deciphering of symbols and also in the expression of symbols. Thank you. That hopefully is good enough for you to understand language disorder. Now we get to the fourth topic, and I call it other concerns. There are just so many areas that I would like to talk to you about. But more importantly, I'll just specify at this time the few concerns that I have. Okay, let me first start with hearing. Okay, as I said earlier, if you cannot hear clearly, you're not going to be able to understand the full essence of messages, whether it's a message at home, a command at home, a description at home, reading a story at home, watching a television program at home, or just simply enjoying a home environment, such as eating together, playing games together. All of those things require good hearing. So early screening is very important. Now in the United States, as I understand it, most children get early newborn screening. Newborn screening will help us understand the hearing condition of a baby. Now, this is not always the best way, but at least we get a screening. Once we realize that the child is not hearing, we must do something early. Early intervention for hearing disorder is crucial for him or her to become capable of hearing the language or languages of his or her environment and school. So hearing is the most important part as far as I'm concerned in the early detection of any problem dealing with listening to the language and then expressing the language. Now there is a confusion that I must explain here. We say deaf and mute or deaf and dumb. Those words can never be used ever again. People who cannot hear can communicate effectively. For centuries, people who are not able to hear have been using sign languages to communicate effectively. They can also learn written language, for sure. So we must make sure we understand this part. Why is a deaf person mute? It is because there is no stimulation auditorily. That's why he or she cannot hear and cannot then sound accordingly, make sounds accordingly. So there is really no mute person. We are talking about hearing loss or deafness. Today, I can say it with 100% assurance that many newborns and young children can benefit from the science and technology that we have developed over time. So cochlear implant is wonderful to help these people. Cochlear implant and also reconstruction and also hearing aids. There are many things that we can do to create a better hearing environment for those who are having difficulty with listening and hearing. So this is the first part I want to say. The second part of speech language concerns is in terms of organic types of problems. Organic types of problems would be in terms of the structure of the speech mechanism. They could be lips, they could be the tongue, they could be dental issues, they could be the cleft palate, or anything in the oral mechanism. There also could be some issues with the nasal passages. Now we're dealing now with simply here, this part. Now if there is any concern with a speech mechanism, we need to go to see an ENT doctor and a surgeon to correct that. I'm talking about cleft palate, cleft lip, or any type of possibility inside the oral cavity that might be problematic. Children who are born with different types of challenges will have to deal with those issues. Let's just say that we have a child with a very high arch, a palatal arch. This child's tongue may be sticking out more, resulting in what we call a lisp, a frontal lisp. For example, a child would be saying things with the tongue coming out, sticking out. That is because many times the arch is too high. We may have other issues with lateral lisp, meaning the tongue sticks out to both sides or one side. It could be unilateral or could be bilateral. These are the kind of concerns we're dealing with. So I hope you have a sense of what speech and language difficulties may be a result of organic difficulties. Thank you very much. Good morning again. This is Lily Chang. This is a big topic that I'm going to talk to you about. Again, I would like to break it down into at least 4 parts so that you have a chance to kind of digest each and every portion of this discussion. And so the general topic is, what does a bilingual language evaluation and therapy look like? Okay, this is a very big topic, so I can only break it into parts so that you can kind of understand what's going on. So the first part would be evaluation, and the second portion would be therapy. But then I would like to also tell you what an optimal language learning environment looks like. And then finally, I think it's important to know that language therapy or language learning happens everywhere, not just in a speech language therapy session. It is a myth to think that only one person in the school district can do this for you. Everyone can do it. Every child counts and every opportunity counts. So I want to make sure you understand that. As parents, you can be the conduit for your child's success. The schools, of course, they're able to facilitate the learning of your children. So let's talk about evaluation. Evaluation can be very formal. That means we have to schedule a time. We have to figure out what is needed for the evaluation. If you have difficulty with hearing, you would need an audiological evaluation, and prior to that, maybe an ENT evaluation. If you have a problem with cleft palate, I'm sure an evaluation will need to go to an ENT doctor and a surgeon. And if you have difficulties in terms of cerebral palsy, I'm sure a physiatrist, a physical therapist, a speech therapist, and an occupational therapist, all of them will be involved in the process of doing an evaluation. Now, if you were talking about purely a speech evaluation, then a speech pathologist would be the best person to do it. So in this evaluation, we must be very clear on our target, on what is it that we're looking at. Now, if this child comes in with a very, very rich language background in Spanish, and we're dealing with an evaluation of speech and language, then Spanish needs to be used as the language of assessment. And then we can do a little trial test, we call it stimulability, to see if this child can make the sounds of the English language. Okay, so this is very clear to me. If this child comes into our evaluation session, we must know what he or she is good at, not what she or he is not able to do. Now, anybody who comes in from another country, let's say Ethiopia or Somalia or some part in South America, or somewhere in Asia, such as Laos or Cambodia. We know that this child will already bring to you a language history, so that language needs to be used. So evaluation requires that we make a decision about what language is used for the evaluation. Now, if you don't know anything about the Lao language, you will need to find someone who can work with you on that. In this case, there is no formal testing of Lao, but you can find someone who can help you as an informant and sometimes as an interpreter to help you understand this child's Lao language. So this is very crucial. Now, do we want to do English? Of course, we need to see how well is this person able to deal with the English language, how little he or she can say, or how much he or she can say, how little he or she can understand, and how much he or she can understand. This is crucial. So the home language must be assessed in some way, many times informally. But I know for a fact that there are language assessment tools in Mandarin, in Spanish, in French, and in many other languages, in Russian and so on. We do need to then have a person who may not be a speech language pathologist who can be an interpreter and an assistant to make this happen. Now, a speech pathologist who happens to be bilingual or multilingual can do the assessment. I myself can speak Mandarin very, very well, Cantonese quite well, and other Mandarin related languages from China. So I myself can do the bilingual assessment. Thank you. Now, I've just talked about assessment, and now let's go to therapy. Therapy can be done individually, and it can be done in a group. Generally, one-on-one therapy is very targeted. If we're looking at a child who has difficulty with English, that is, after the evaluation, we will then deal with English language, and most of the time, this child may also be experiencing difficulty in the home language. So let's see what we can do to create a better environment for this child. So it is possible that the speech language pathologist will focus on speech. And this way, there will be some articulation issues to deal with, such as the placement of the tongue, the placement of the lips, and the dental areas. So let's say we have difficulty with the sound F. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we will need to show the placement of the upper teeth on the lower lip. 4, 5. And then if that's the case, then in Mandarin we have fa and fu. So it's very important we also help with the home language. So home language can be done at home. If the speech pathologist can only deal with English, that is perfectly fine. Let's deal with a sound that's not in Mandarin, such as s. So we can work with this child and focus on targeted sound, such as s. So it's interdental sound. And if we have difficulty with the velars in the back, then we may go 裤子,裤子,苦瓜,可爱,可,可,可. Then we can deal with kitty, kitty cat, kitty, kitty cat. And so that would be English and both Mandarin. We can deal with the back, k, k sound. And if we have difficulty with s, we can deal with 3, 1, 2, 3. We can also do Sam. Sam is a good boy. Sam is my good friend. Sam is a good person. Uncle Sam is a wonderful symbol. Okay, so we can deal with S in that way. So therapy can be very targeted. There usually will be some homework that can be associated with speech therapy, because those sounds can be transferred at home. And the home, in the home, we can also target 1, 2, 3, or Sam is a good boy, things like that. So that would be speech. But how about language? Language is more important in the context of overall communication. For example, send me a message. Then that would be sending a message. So there would be the S in the middle of message, and then also the final consonant J will have to be also practiced. So when you have a send me a message type of a communication, then you have to break the speech pattern into the different units. Send me a message. So if the child can get to the combination of words and sounds from single syllable to many syllables, then we can deal with more of a language pattern. In this case, this would be the therapy of trying to deal with targeting meaning sounds in words, in context, such as a little story or a little rhyme. It could be row, row your boat, not woe, woe your boat. So it's very important to deal with the row, 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 row your boat gently down the stream. And in this case, stream might be the cluster of STR. That may be very difficult. And then maybe the final consonant of So gently down the stream. So we are not only dealing with a word or a sound cluster, but for them, for the whole thing, it would be in a phrase, in a rhyme, in context. So language therapy is done in many different ways, and storytelling is one of them. Nursery rhymes would be another one of them, and singing would be another one. For example, row, row, row your boat is actually row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. So merrily, 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 life is but a dream. So in this case, we can have many, many words, but it's done in a nursery rhyme or in a sound. So I just want to give you a glimpse again of what language therapy is all about. Thank you. So now I want to talk a little bit about what I call OLE. OLE means optimum language environment or language learning environment, OLE or OLLE, and OLE could be also OLLEE, optimum language learning environment in English, because in this case the school's language is English, or the school language is English. But we can use the same methodology, the same concept in delivering language at home. It is so important we look at school language, home language, and bilingual school environment. I happen to be someone that will have to deal with bilingual, trilingual school settings. So I always talk about school languages. But in this case, I would like to narrow it down to optimum language learning environment. What are some of the ingredients of an optimum language learning environment? First of all, we hope it's authentic. That means it's something that is really genuinely happening. Secondly, I want to make it relevant to the environment. For example, right now, I'm in San Diego. I heard the news that the Midwest and maybe the East Coast they are suffering tremendously because of the snow. And the temperature is now 20 degrees or 30 degrees below zero. Now imagine we have an environment like that, where snow is causing a lot of schools to close, to shut down, and also a lot of services to shut down, and also airports are closed. So if we use that as an authentic model, then we can say that snow is falling. Snow is falling heavily. Snow is everywhere. Roads are blocked because of heavy snow. So we're dealing with the word snow, and we're dealing with the word which has a cluster. It's SN, snow. Okay? So if we are going to do that, we can use this as a very authentic way of dealing with snow. And we can look at the television, we can see the snow falling. We can look outside, we can see the snow falling. And if we have kids coming back to school after heavy snow, we can use that as an environmental threat to our going to school, going to the shops, or going to do daily businesses. So we can use the word snow, and that is relevant, that is authentic, and that is totally optimum for learning, because we can touch it, we can feel it, we can see it, we can feel it, we can understand it. So that's called a very important environment for relevance and also for authenticity. Now at home, we can talk about, for example, coming up is Chinese New Year. So we can talk about New Year, Happy New Year, Chinese New Year. What do? We have red envelopes. So we can deal with the envelope, red envelope, what we put into the red envelope, money, and who do we give the red envelopes to? We can talk about children, we can talk about clothes, nice clothes, new clothes, we can talk about food. So at home, we can create an optimal language learning environment by using what is relevant. Again, what's real, what's here and now. And teachers, speech pathologists, parents, caretakers can all do that. We can also create an optimum environment at home. For example, mother is cooking, so she can talk about, I am chopping some onions. I'm making a dough. I'm putting meat, onions, and vegetables in the dough, as the filling in the dough, and I can make something. So make it relevant, make it authentic, make it here and now, make it real, make it simple. You can see it, hear it, touch it, make it optimal. So the Olay is for everybody. Now we can also go back to a theme such as holiday season, such as Christmas. We can talk about a gift, we can wrap up a gift, we can use ribbons, we can use paper to package it, we can have a box, we can have some papers inside, we can have a little note inside, and we can make a card, and so on and so forth. Make it relevant. Language learning is about real life situation. We do not have to depend on many books or anything like that. We can use here and now. We can tell a story. We can use a language loaded environment, and we can do it everywhere and anywhere, and anyone and everyone can do it. We can do it bilingually, we can do it monolingually, we can do it in English, we can do it in Swahili, we can do it in Spanish, we can do it in Chinese. The best of luck to you in creating an optimum language environment for all children. So finally, I want to spend a little bit of time on what parents can do. I do not want to say this sentence, that is, parents don't know what to do. I want to say that parents can do a lot. Parents are important. Parents are pivotal. Parents are so important. If parents both work and spend very little time at home, and then the caretakers must also be counted into this formula. So parents, grandparents, caretakers, even friends and neighbors and members of the community are all so important in creating a good language learning environment. Most parents that I know are helpless. They don't know what to do. They feel that they are caught in a situation where they don't know what's the next step. And sometimes they're even frustrated because their child is not able to communicate effectively. So home environment is crucial. Make it easy for the child to use language to communicate. Make it difficult for the child to just point or pull you over. Make it easy for the child to point at something and try to say it. Now, I would like to also say an important sentence, and I'm saying it based on what I know about children and child language. There are some children who will not use oral language to communicate. There will be some adults who will seldom speak or cannot use oral language. So when I talk about communication, it is clear that I want to say that I am not saying only oral language or oral speech. I'm saying there are many different ways to do it. So I want to urge you to think about A, that's augmentative, A, alternative, C, communication. AAC, that is alternative and augmentative communication system. You must be able to find out that there are children who will use and benefit greatly from AAC. These are the children who will not use oral language to communicate, but will use alternative systems to communicate. They can communicate effectively, and they can communicate very well. When I was a young speech language pathologist, I worked with a child who has cerebral palsy, and I tried so much to get him to speak, because at that time I thought speaking is the only thing we know how to use to communicate. I did not realize that he really was so dysarthric. I did not realize that speech was not the best way. I did not realize that. But over a period of time, I realized he could read and he could understand and he could hear me beautifully. So I realized that he could use a way to communicate. In those days, we had to use a typewriter. So I figured out a way for him to communicate. He wrote me the best letter in the world, thanking me for him to find a voice, and the voice is through a typewriter. He eventually won a huge award in poetry. He was beautiful, but he was never able to use oral language. Today, AAC is absolutely wonderful. Many people can benefit from AAC. That is, children can communicate effectively through other means, through technology, through mechanisms that can help them make a voice, and the machine can help the voice come out. Furthermore, we should be able to encourage any type of speech and verbal output. So if there's a child who's trying to say moon, that is 月亮 in Mandarin. 月亮 in Mandarin, it's a very difficult little output. If the child says and means 月亮, we will be very happy to say yes, 月亮, okay. Or a child is trying to say breakfast, it came out 爸爸, 爸爸, that means breakfast. We'll say, oh, you want breakfast. This creates a better environment that we know children go through baby talk, and children go through that process. Even though this child may be 4 or 5, if he or she is attempting to say something, we should definitely encourage it and repeat it correctly. Oh, breakfast. You mean breakfast. You want breakfast. Oh, you want cereal. We will get you some cereal. Provide the most important language target example, and then encourage this to happen. I wish you the best of luck. Thank you.